Hello. I hate to think how many people my guests have killed among them. But I can explain that. With fear very big these days, and with Halloween and all that, we thought it might be good to get together some of the people who produce horrible books and movies. That doesn't sound very complimentary. That might have been worded better. But they have scared all of us at some time or other. And I would like to introduce to you now these gentlemen who specialize in fear and horror and terror, either on the printed page or on the screen. Will you welcome first the author of Carrie and The Shining, Mr. Stephen King, and next to him the director of the cult classic films Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, Mr. George Romero, the author of Rosemary's Baby, The Stepford Wives, Boys from Brazil, the play Death Trap, Mr. Ira Levin, and finally the man who wrote Ghost Story, Julia, not to be confused with Lillian Hellman's Julia, and a new book called Shadowland, Mr. Peter Straub. That's our group. There's several ways to go at this. We could all tell scary stories or talk about where they come from. If I were to say, what's the worst thing that you've ever done, would that ring a bell with at least one of you? Can somebody explain that? Get me off that hook.
I use that as the start of a novel called Ghost Story. And it's keyed into a group of older men who tell stories about the worst thing they ever did or the worst thing that ever happened to them. And the Ghost Story evolves from that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what is the appeal? Do you know? Is it worth analyzing, or should we just say it's just fun to be scared? Have you given any thought to why horror is something people willingly subject themselves to?
I think it's fun. I think people enjoy seeing a horror film or reading a scary book the way they enjoy going into a laugh in the dark or on a roller coaster ride. You go in knowing, or you go in with high expectations. And I think the ones that work on that audience are the ones that really pay off. In other words, the ones that give you that little zets and give you that involuntary response, reaction to it that you went in hoping to get.
I think something else that horror does is society gives points, you know, for good emotional behavior. So we get points for exercising those emotional muscles that society approves of: love, friendship, loyalty, humor, that sort of thing. But for every one of those good emotions, we have a dark one as well. We have fear, we have aggressiveness, we have anger, we all have, I suppose, urges that sometimes tend towards sadism, that sort of thing. And a horror story or a horror movie gives us a chance to exercise that side in a comparatively harmless way.
Exorcised?
Exorcised. Yeah.
Do you fellows happen to specialize in this field and could just as easily be in another one? Or if not, then mustn't you be weird in some way?
I don't know, I work at a car wash, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I really wonder about that. I was trying to think of a tactful way to put it. But,
No, I don't think we're any more weird
think
than
Steve
the
is
people
weird.
who enjoy the things we produce. I think it's the same thing. We're just producers and they're consumers, but we're subject to the same emotions and working with
there has to
them.
be some real reason that you're in this field and not another one.
Well, I think you have a predilection toward it.
Yeah.
Ira Levin and I discovered that as children, we entertained other children by telling ghost stories to them. And so it was there, and I think I made mine up, but I'm sure he made his up. And it was just a way of exercising our imaginations that we came to very young.
I was warped as a child. So a lot of horror comics in my past, and a lot of horror movies and that sort of thing, and it warped me as a kid. And
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously warped me. And the thing is, I think that see, they know. In the world as it is today, though, I think if you don't have a few warps in your record, you can't get along. And that's one of the great appeals that the horror story has. There's been a lot of analysis, a lot of it almost ludicrous, it seems to me, about horror in the wake of the big hits like George's Dawn of the Dead and Ghost Story and The Shining and all of that sort of thing. And really, I think what a lot of it is a sort of harmless blow-off for anxieties and bad feelings.
Yeah. Where would we have seen your warpedness if we'd known you earlier, before you began?
I get rid of most of it through this sort of thing. People say, well, do you have bad dreams? And the answer is no. I give them all to somebody else. I sleep well. And it works that way for the writer, I think, or the filmmaker as well. I guess there's a kind of blow-off. And
if you didn't have that blow-off, would you be haunting graveyards and
Graveyards might be haunting you. I think you're tapping another emotion. I mean, I've often felt that to some extent with me it was accident. There were genre films that I loved of all different types. I love jungle movies. And had my first hit been a jungle movie, I might be a great jungle movie maker. But so to that extent it was accidental. And but I think there's a list of those involuntary emotions. Laughter, if you can make an audience laugh, cry, startle. Those are the things that you're really trying to do, and that's what you're sort of honing your work down to try to accomplish, to get that involuntary response out. And it's those involuntary responses that make people say, gee, that was great. But when people say about Salem's Lot, geez, I loved it, they're basically saying it scared the hell out of me. It's clear cut. They don't, you know, it's basically a different response that you get from a reader that read Salem's Lot or Rosemary's Baby than you get from a reader that read The Winds of War. If you ask someone, did you like The Winds of War, they'll go into 10 minutes about, you know, but if you ask someone, did you like Rosemary's Baby, what they immediately respond to is, yeah, it scared me. What they mean is, it scared me.
Yeah, but I think it goes beyond that. I really do. And that when people say that I love Salem's Lot, I think also, besides the wonderful, wonderful scares, I think they're saying that the scares worked because they felt involved at a gut level with the people and that the characters convinced them. And when they say they like Rosemary's Baby, the same is true, and they responded also to the satire. Because horror has it offers great entree to social observation and to satire. I think there's a lot of fun in it.
Yeah. There's that wonderful moment in Kubrick's film where Nicholson looks through the door and says, here's Johnny. My kids run around and say that now. You know? I have a 3-year-old who goes around. Yeah. I have a 3-year-old boy who goes around saying, Daddy's not here now. The little finger thing. It's very funny. Yeah. Another thing.
He's not warped then.
Of course he's warped.
He's warped.
Yeah, he's very warped. One of the things that all these genres do, I responded to what George said about if his first hit had been a jungle picture, because you take all of these things and they're genres. There's horror, there's, for instance, the crime picture, my God, can this be the end of Rico? Jungle pictures, all of these things. And what all this genre fiction does, mysteries, is they make the writer or the filmmaker tell a real story. You know, and I think in a lot of ways you just gravitate toward that idea of story. You want to tell tales.
That's very important, I think. I think that's the heart of it, really. That there's a story which can engulf you and grab your lapels the way fairy tale did when you were 6 years old.
And you can't tell a story. You can't tell a story. I mean, you can't scare anybody unless there's a story and characters for them to be involved in.
Yeah.
Scares don't exist in a vacuum.
So you're forced
Some
into
real
telling a
set.
story, as you're saying. Yeah.
Even as just now that clipboard moved and no one was near it.
Unfortunately, I was near.
Oh, you did that. Oh, okay, I feel better then.